Hey, nurse bosses, have you ever thought about running your own logistics company? On today's episode of the Nurse Boss Shift, we're talking to Melanie Patterson, who made the shift from ER trauma nurse to running a trucking empire. Melanie discusses how she got into trucking, learned the government contract game, and uses the skills she gained as a nurse to help her run her trucking business. You don't want to miss this episode if you ever had a dream that was completely outside of the nursing box. Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I don't even know what episode this is because we feel like we've just been recording, knocking them out, but we want to welcome you to the Nurse Boss Shift, where shift happens. My name is Dr. Kiiyonna Jones.
And I'm Christal Parker.
And we are super excited to have Miss Melanie Patterson on, and she has an amazing story and one that we know is going to just blow you guys' mind and start getting you to think outside of the box. Now listen, Christal and I know that, I have an aesthetic practice. Christal has an aesthetic practice. We teach IV hydration, but there are some dope ass nurses out here who are going beyond healthcare and getting a real bag. And so it is intentional that we have Miss Melanie on here because she is one of those. And so Melanie has been a ED nurse. And let me tell you, I have a whole different type of for ED nurses. I'm sorry. And it's funny because Christal's an ED nurse too. I have a respect beyond measure for ED nurses. And even as house soup, I didn't like to go round in the ED. That's how bad it was for me. So for you guys to have been in ED and then made the transition and really been on the front line, the front door of the hospital, I think that just alone is kudos. So you've done that for 7 years and then you made your way into logistics. So Melanie, can you please give us some information about you, a little background about you, like how this even started? You can start with your nursing background and then how you segue into that.
Oh boy. Okay. So I'm going to have to take you a little bit back. And so really just to be transparent and be honest with you, a girl from Chicago, became a product of my environment and met some adversities, and I ended up at an alternative high school. And so at that alternative high school, my principal, rest in peace, Miss Hawkins, was like, there's something about you. I'm going to sponsor you to go to college. You're going to go to college. We're not just ending at this alternative high school. And so fast forward, I went down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, out of all places, right? So I attended Stillman University. My first major was business management and administration. And I loved it. It was cool, but I guess God had other plans for me, right? So I was presented with the opportunity to shadow at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA. And so I jumped at the opportunity and I fell in love. I fell in love with the industry of nursing. And so I was like, where do I start? That shadowing experience was like NICU, and I knew that wasn't my area per se, but overall I fell in love with medicine and nursing and the whole concept. So I came back home to Chicago and I started to look into like ground level. What would this look like, right? Well, you can go to junior college and get your associate's degree. And I was starting to talk to people who were in the industry, and they advised, hey, look, for you to be a prudent or a well-respected nurse, you need to start out with your CNA, certified nurse assistant. And I was like, all right, cool. So I started to do that. I got my certificate at Malcolm X College. I started to work part-time as a nurse assistant, and I still love the industry of nursing. So I started to attend school on the junior college level and do my prerequisites. And then I transferred over into my bachelor's degree. And so completed with a bachelor's degree and immediately started working in ER trauma. Because after clinicals, I kind of had an idea of what was for me. It was either going to be, med surg geriatric or ER. When I got to ER, I was like, this is it. This is me. This speaks to
Wow.
my core. Raised by a single mother. And being in underserved communities, I identified with it. And so I worked in ER for like 5 years, 5.5, 6 years. And then I played the whole corporate game, right? So ladies, as nurses, right? It's all about the acronyms behind your name. It's all about that continuing education. And so I played that corporate game, the competitive person within me. I had all of the certifications that you can adorn, being ER trauma. And they're like, no. If you want that magic 6 figures, you need to go back to school for your master's degree. And I was like, okay, all right, cool. Let's do that. If that's going to get me to the 6 figures and a little bit more autonomy, sure. Why not? So I went back, I got my master's degree in family nurse practitioner. And I graduated from school and I entered into the industry, and they were like, oh, no 6 figures. It's saturated. Family nurse practitioner is saturated. It's not in demand like it used to be. And so I felt defeated. I felt really, really defeated. And so that's like the nursing part of Melanie. With that though, I also was a serial entrepreneur with my partner, my husband. And at that time we had a real estate investment company as well as a grooming salon. And so I would leave the ER and I would go to work in my company. And I'm like, wait a minute, something's not adding up here. So I've, had the thought like, what would this look like me working full time as an entrepreneur? And I started to play with the idea, started to once again talk to people. And they knew that we were, investors and serial entrepreneurs. And they're like, you need to look into this trucking thing. I looked into it. I'm like, no, I don't know about this. Long story short, it presented itself again, and here I am.
Wow, that is powerful. So you went through first of all, the fact that somebody sponsored you, like, we do not realize the impact that we could have on other people. And I haven't had that happen, but there has definitely been pivotal moments where I was like, I didn't think about something and someone saw in me what I didn't see in myself. And we'd be surprised how that could change someone's trajectory in life and just give us the permission, the confidence to show up. So I think you'd be surprised if we were to trace your seed to even entrepreneurship, you could directly correlate it to that moment where somebody believed in you enough to do that. And I think that is so amazing. So let me ask you this. You were in ED, right? And as I said, I really truly believe it takes a unique person. I think honestly, we all have our quirks, right? Like a critical care nurse is a critical care nurse. They have the certain characteristics. ED nurse, psych nurse, right? They all have these certain characteristics. NICU, PICU, right? So my question is, what you experienced in ED are some of the skills that you obtained there. How were they transferable in your business?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a great question. And so I was just speaking yesterday on another interview that I had. A lot of the tools that I developed in ER and working within corporate, I've transferred over into transportation and logistics. So what are some of those characteristics and some of those things that I've transferred over? For sure is critical thinking on your feet, right? As an ER nurse, we're getting those gunshots, we're getting those burns, those strokes, heart attacks. And so you have to critically think and think fast, right? And make sure you're making the right decision. So that's one of the things that I've definitely have carried over. Also too, as an ED nurse, as Christal can attest to, it's an essential worker, right? It's an essential worker. We work on holidays, we Christmas mornings, Thanksgivings. And so our work ethic is a little bit different versus a school nurse. Nothing against school nurses, right? And so I've transferred over that work ethic into entrepreneurship as well. And then the third one that I would say is that I've transferred over from nursing into entrepreneurship is analyzing. So development of a care plan, right? Let's talk about it. When you're developing a care plan, right? You get the patient, they present with their presenting symptoms, right? You develop a diagnosis, then you have a treatment, you implement the treatment, right? You reassess, right? And then you correct if you need to adjust the medication or things of that nature, right? Same concept. Same concept.
That's so funny that you mentioned that, because I just had an interview 2 days ago and I told her ad pie. I said, ad pie, that's what we do in business. And you're literally saying the same thing. It is so true too.
It is. Yes.
Chris, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Oh, okay, cool. So ad pie for sure is, and I actually, it's funny. I was like, when you think about it, everything we do, we have to evaluate and then go back and like figure out, did it work? Did it not work? What things we need to change? But the difference is that nobody's going to die if it didn't work. And like, I think that's the hardest part to get for nurses, like try it, because like you don't really know until you do it. And, you may have some context clues that'll help you decide on whether it's probable or not probable to fail, but you really don't know, and you just kind of figure it out. And if it doesn't work, then you go back to the drawing board. And I love that I don't have to worry about like it being a life or death thing in business if I make the wrong decision, right? Instead, it's just like a lesson that I've learned. I may have lost some money, but money can be replaced. You don't want the loss of life on your because you were irresponsible or something like that. So
yeah, that's amazing that you said that, because it's so true, right? So ER trauma, not only do you have to have critical thinking, but you need to have a sense of like, all right, cool. This medication is for this particular presenting symptoms. All right. So, if we're dealing with bradycardia, tachycardia, right? Moving forward into entrepreneurship, in entrepreneurship, it's the risk that's the most rewarding. So it's the L's that bring those valuable lessons. And so in entrepreneurship, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to take that risk, because that's where you're going to develop the characteristics of a more knowledgeable and well-rounded entrepreneur, right? It's going to do your business good. So hurry up and fail fast, as what one of my mentors, hurry up and fail, right? So very, very different.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that we try so hard to get nurses to understand, is that we have to do it ugly, and it's not going to be perfect. But in nursing school, we're so used to, or in nursing in general, we're so used to checking off everything and getting it right the first time, or someone's life is at risk. So that's a big mindset shift that nurses have to have, is that you have to be okay with failing. It's okay. No, we're not being graded or judged based on who got the best grades, in school. Like, just try it. And if you don't succeed, it's okay. It just teaches you for the next time. So that's so important that you said that.
For sure.
Okay, so my question is, and this is something I always ask our guests, like so I always put myself in the position of our listeners, right? Most of them are probably employees, or if they're not bedside, they may be in corporate, or they may be at the clinic, or they may be a school nurse or whatever. So what gave you the confidence, or did you get the confidence? Like, did you like mentally make the transition? Because I know you said you were doing it, then you was like, I could work full time, but there had to be some like, I'm scared. Like, what did you feel, and how did you was it your support system? Did you like have already a lot of money? Like, tell me something that made you just like, all right, I'm about to do it. What happened?
Okay, so I didn't have a lot of money. Let's start there.
People will make the excuse of like, oh, she must have had money, or her husband must be rich, or her dad. Always find a reason.
Let's be honest. Okay, so fully transparent. Yes, I had a few coins to play with, but we're talking about transportation. $100,000 is a drop in the bucket in this industry. And so we did liquidate some of our real estate portfolio and invest it into trucking. But like I just said, if you don't really handle this thing correctly and understand the industry, 100, 200K is nothing. You'll get ate alive if you really don't understand the business. But back to your first question. So really, honestly, you got to remember, I'm a girl from Chicago, from around the way. So fear for me, risk, that's what I did. That's, you can ask all of my friends, my family. She's a risk taker for sure. So I wasn't so much fearful, but I had to have that to thy own self be true conversation, right? Because we're coming from W-2, comfortability, a career. This is not a job. Shout out to all the people who do have jobs, but nursing is a career. You can actually have a decent living. You can provide for your family and your children. Once again, that magical 6-figure, that's pretty comfortable, along with 401k, medical benefits, and things of that nature, right? And so I had to really say, like, what would this really look like? Walking away from my comfort level, my comfort blanket, my security, and taking this jump. At that time, I had just had a child, my second child. And so I'm like, am I making the right decision for my family? Is this a selfless decision, or is this a good decision for my unit? And then, of course, we also had to look at the numbers, like you said, right? So for me, I'm being transparent. For me, I cashed out my 401k and I invested it. And so I'm disclaimer, I'm not advising anyone to do that. But I was just so confident, and I started to build out that business plan. I started to build the blueprint on what this was going to look like. And so I was so confident that I just jumped, and I said, God, guide my steps. And I did I had mentorship and I had guidance, and luckily I'm still on my feet, 10 toes down. But yeah, it was just questions that I had to have. I had to have a transparent conversation with myself, with my partner. And then ultimately I had to make that decision. And luckily it was right before COVID, girls. I mean, I don't even know what it was. It was just like, ER trauma. It's not easy, so sometimes I would get in the car, my calves would be throbbing. I'm like, yo, I didn't even get a break. I didn't even get a lunch break today, And so that's our truth. Right. And, it was just one of those moments where it was just like, you kind of know when you're ready, because it was always a thought. I played around with it for about a year, and, it was, just one of those moments. It's like, it's time. And I handed in my notice.
Okay. What was that process like? Because Christal and I also talk about kind of transitioning, like I didn't have the luxury of having it. I mean, well, when I started business, I cashed out my 401k too. And I don't recommend that either, by the way, but I did what I did. It just made sense for me. Right. But I did not have the luxury of like quitting. Right. So I segued out. Christal right now is down to 1 day a week. And she has her business. So she was full time in ED, and then she's transitioning. And so that's kind of how I did it. I tell people, do what works best for you, but you don't have to quit to be a business owner. You can start off on the side and work your way. But if you're miserable, you need to do something. That's my biggest thing. But tell me what that was like, deciding like, I am leaving and I am about to pursue this full time. Where were you at in that mental space? Had you already been bringing in the revenue? And then how did you feel? Like, tell us that story. Take us on a dramatic journey of like how you turned in that notice, so we can fantasize. We want to live vicariously through you.
I don't know if it was just if it was a dramatic drop the mic type of situation. But I just so I was fortunate enough to had invest in other areas, and so we had several other businesses, but at the same time it was my passion. So let's really get real personal for a moment, right? So I live not so right in my youth. And so when I did find myself, and I my parents were proud of me when I, finished nursing school. It's a rewarding career. You made it. You're not in jail. You're not pregnant. You don't have 5 baby daddies, and so they were proud. And I was proud of myself. That was one thing that no man gave me. That was one thing that I didn't buy. That was something that I earned. That was mine as a troubled youth, as a minority woman, now as a mother. I remember I have pictures to this day with my daughter in my lap, and, I'm finishing grad school, working on a thesis, an assignment, a care plan, studying for a test, and all of those things. And so that was my struggle to say, it's okay, Melanie, to move on to a new journey, to a new project, to a new task. You're not a failure. So a lot of people are like, you're crazy. You're out your mind. How could you leave nursing? How could you? It's so rewarding. You're paid well. It's always in demand. You'll never need a job. You'll never go without a job. And I said, exactly. So if this doesn't work, I know I'm good. I know I got something to fall back on. So I'm good. And so I had to detach myself from that aspect of it. And I was just looking like, man, I'm not fulfilled anymore. You know what I mean? This is my passion. I love ER. I love my patients. I love the community. I love my staff. ER, we're a family. It's not just the nurses. It takes an actual village, right? To run this machine from EMT to firefighters to your care tech, to, you know what I mean? All of those moving pieces to save that life. Right. And I just was like, I'm not fulfilled anymore. I didn't feel fulfilled any longer. And so I said, be true to yourself. Right. And when I transitioned, I made sure I did it in the most respectable way. I didn't want to, there was no mic drop situation. As nurses, most nurses, we operate with professionalism and integrity. And so I put in my notice and I transitioned out, gracefully, at the height of my career as well. And I bowed down gracefully and respectfully. But it was really, nothing dramatic, nothing too crazy. But I know that I will tell you this today. I do not feel like I have the support now that I've placed myself and my business online and in front of the public. So social media can really see what we're doing at Team Integrity Knowledge Center. I don't feel the support from my former colleagues, my former nurses. There's a few, that have been supportive. But then there's also a few who are like, she's a traitor and things of that nature. So that hurts. But once again, you have to live in your purpose and live in your truth. And so it was a hard decision, but an easy one too.
I really feel like that was a mic drop. I know you don't, but like you just took us through a whole drop. That was because it's so many levels and layers. Like you literally took us through all of that because you had to realize that I'm not being fulfilled. This was something that is like really closely tied to your past, and major accomplishments happened that took you to these different levels. And then you had to make a decision. And it's not like, I said F y'all and I walked out, not like that dramatic, but I'm just saying like, it takes a lot of thought and like reflection and like, going through, okay, I've done this, I love my team. I love the people I work with, but I have to make this decision. And like, I feel like it's so indoctrinated in us because we are a team and a collective. And we're like, you've mentioned your team a lot of times in this short 20 minutes that we've been on, because that's how connected you are. Right. Mm-hmm. And so making the decision to transition, knowing how much you love it, is reason, believe it or not, that a lot of nurses don't leave. A lot of nurses are like, oh God, they're going to be same reason why they won't call in sick or, it's like,
yeah, me. I was that girl. I was that girl. Didn't call off. My team needs me. This is my scheduled shift. Who are they going to find to fulfill that shift? And that was another thing too. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I after having children, I don't know if you ladies have children, but missing out on Christmas morning, it hits different. That was so committed to my career. I was so committed to these patients and my obligation as an ER nurse. I would work every, a scheduled holiday. But when children came along, that looks a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that reminds me of, because I had my babies during COVID, both of them, pretty much. So I was at home feeling so guilty. Now it's COVID. I have the chance of getting it, dying, bringing it home to my family, my newborns. Yeah. But I'm like, man, they need me. I feel bad for being at home and they're all struggling. I sent them lunch sometimes. I wanted to go up there and bring them stuff. Like, I just felt so bad. And that's just the guilt that we have attached to it, because as you said, that's our team, our family, and they're struggling. And what made it easier for me is that slowly people started leaving. So it gave me the encouragement, like, okay, when the original people who you built that bond with start leaving, then that kind of gave me my okay to go. Before that, the guilt was just extreme. And then, like you said, when kids came along, I knew that I didn't want it, because missing holidays with just family was so heart-wrenching to me. But to think about missing it when my kids came along, that's when I was like, okay, I have to make that change too.
Yeah.
So that's so powerful.
Yeah,
for sure. That's powerful. Now, I've had a kid all my life, so I was a teen mom. So, but as I have grown and matured, so I was in school the whole time. My daughter's 25, so I was in school the whole time, and so it is what it is. But as I, started getting older, and like, as I had my other kids, I was like, I started really going through that mom guilt, and like, I'm never going to get these times again. And like, I don't want to miss them. And, then it became like, okay, I have to balance it out. And so working per diem worked well for me for that. Usually I didn't work on holidays because the staff wanted the pay and all that. So it always ended up working well for me the 7 years that I was per diem. But my question to you now, okay, so we talked about nursing, we've covered all that. How the heck can somebody get into this industry? Like you secured over $2.5 million in grants, government grants. So let's say we have a person who is listening to this right now in their car on their way to their 12-hour shift. And like, I want to do this, but I don't understand what the heck logistic is, because it's me right now. I'm hurt. I don't understand what the heck logistics is. Like, where would I even start? Can you give a few tips for those who may consider logistics, some things that you may have done or even that you didn't do that you would have done different if given the chance, like looking back? So can you give a few tips to the people, the nurses who want to get into this?
Yeah, for sure. I personally, I have a bias, but I just feel that nurses just do so well in entrepreneurship overall because of our discipline. And so jump. That's the first thing that I want to say. But what is trucking, logistics, transportation? And so it's a whole ecosystem. So from manufacturing from China, right, to being put on the plane or the boat via sea, then it comes to the ground, right, into the warehouses, and it's transported via truck, box truck, other ways to your doorstep. Right. And so it's the way of the world. That's how we are able to those earrings that you have. Right. You got them from the actual store, but they came from logistics, the whole ecosystem of logistics. And so we are essential workers as well. Truck drivers are essential workers. During COVID, we were essential. Right. Putting dinner on our dinner table for Thanksgiving. Those are my drivers. Those are our trucks moving and making that happen. And so that's a simple 101 breakdown of what this industry looks like. Now, coming from a nurse perspective, working a 9 to 5, what can you do to kind of start to transition? Have the conversation with yourself, right? Pen to paper, get a business plan, start to study what is transportation, what is logistics, because I looked at it from the lens of a nurse and I said, we're essential workers and there's a lot of different divisions of this paradigm, right? So we have dispatchers, which are people who call and make sure that the trucks are where they're supposed to go. We have truck drivers who are just company drivers or owner operators who drive the big trucks or the vans or the box trucks, right? Then we have fleet owners who are entrepreneurs and owners of those trucks who whose job is to make sure those trucks are moving. Then we have the brokers. The brokers speak directly with the shippers. Then we have freight forwarders who actually are the middleman from the manufacturer in China or India to get it on the boat or the plane to get it here to the warehouses, right? So just like nursing, right? We have psych, we have geriatrics, we have med surg, we have ER, we have oncology. Figure out exactly what area of this paradigm fits best with you, right? What can you afford to enter in? Like, so dispatching is like one of the lowest barriers to penetrate because it's very easy, it's very low cost as far as business startup. Now, if you're talking about, owning a fleet of trucks, that's going to look very different, right? So we have to know the numbers. We have to do the numbers. Most importantly, hands down, you have to have mentorship. There's no questions about it, right? So a mentor should really take decades and turn them into days. They should really give you the blueprint and lay down the foundation to your success. A lot of us are scared to pay for mentorship or to align ourselves with people who may not necessarily look like us. If you get what I'm saying, this industry is it's dominated by Caucasian males. And so oftentimes I am the youngest and the one who looks like this in those rooms. But you have to not be intimidated by that, right? You got to go for what you know and go for what you believe in and what your vision is and the legacy that you're trying to set. And so don't be fearful. For sure. Don't be fearful, but understand your numbers, understand what this will look like for you, and understand the power in proximity and mentorship. And so with that, let me speak a little bit to Team Integrity Knowledge Center and how I transitioned from nursing into transportation, right? So I got into the industry. I finally said it presented itself again. I said, okay, cool. Let me really look at this trucking thing and what's all to it. And I was like, oh, it's pretty saturated. There's a lot of trucking companies out here. So I took my nursing and my competitive self and I said, what's going to set me apart?
Yes. Unique selling proposition.
Right. Yes. What certifications do I need? What do I need? Right? Because I know that I just can't enter into this business, being a previous businesswoman, being a nurse, and just be like everyone else. Right? So what are my differentiators? Let's leverage what I already have, ladies. I'm minority, I'm woman, and we have the government who has to spend money with me. Right. And so I basically aligned both of them together. I took trucking, transportation, logistics, however you want to label it, and I merged it with GovCon, government contracting. And so I went back to the table. I said, hey, look, we got to structure this thing as me being 51% shareholder, leverage my minority status, leverage my woman status, and let's start doing business. And so with that, 4 months after registering the company, we won our first 6-figure contract for 3 years, and none of our trucks had to haul the commodity, the product. I said, damn, I'm onto something. Hold on. Let's look a little more. Let's see what's to this. And so moving forward, we have done large 7-figure contracts. But I was like, what was most rewarding to me in nursing? Giving back to those underserved communities that I came from, that I was raised in, that I can identify with. There's no way that I can do this and reach this level of success, if that's what you want to call it, and not reach back to the people who look like me. And so I started to document my processes, from sourcing contracts, from marketing to, looking for bids and solicitations and seeing what's out there. And I started to just document that whole process. And that's where the inception of Team Integrity Knowledge Center came from. And so now we offer mentorship where we're guiding our minority small business owners into government contracting so we can really build longevity within a very white male dominated, but also inherited industry.
Oh, it is, huh? Okay, I didn't know that. That's okay. So it's usually generational. People, okay. Oh, and so you're coming in first generation in, and you're a woman and you're African American, and they're like, who is this? Right? That is so dope. Christal, you have a question? Because I can keep going. You know that. So,
well, the wheels are always, here we go again. Like, what can we do?
Right. I need to start a logistic business. Listen, we know an interview is good when we think about we're going to start one. The business.
Yes.
I love it. Go ahead, Chris.
So then you started teaching you teach small businesses or other women minority, or what is your training center focus on? Who do you focus on training?
Yeah. So Team Integrity Knowledge Center target audience is primarily small business owners who are in logistics and transportation. And they're primarily minorities. But of course, women, because us as women, we kind of take the initiative and take the wheel. If you look at any Fortune 400 or 500 company, there's a male, in the front of the CEO in the C-level suite, but there's a woman running that operation, right? And so that's our target audience is small business owners. So fleet owners is primarily our top client, and then minority women.
Okay. So can we just really quickly talk about the, because I think you're referring to the designation, right? Like the women owned, what it's called, women, minority owned business, and then the women owned business through the SBA. Is that the certification you're referring to? That you have?
There's different levels of certification. So you have certifications on the state level, and then you have the city, state, and then the federal level.
Okay.
And so you have small business, and then you have minority business enterprise, and then you have woman business enterprise, and then on the federal level you have economically disadvantaged woman owned, and then you have just woman owned small business.
And so did you apply for all of those certifications, or did you find someone to apply for you? How did you do that? And by the way, that's not exclusive for our listeners too. That's not exclusive to logistics. That's any business. So
let's talk about it. So Team Integrity Knowledge Center, yes, right now we're focusing on what I know, but we also have clients that are outside of logistics, right? Yeah. So this applies to the government purchases any and everything, right? Yeah. So let's paint a picture. They purchase from vanilla folders to condoms for the commissary and the jail systems to logistics. They also have solicitations for aesthetics, wigs, barber supplies, and barber consulting and education. The government purchases everything, right? And so this applies across the board. Thank you for mentioning that. So that is across the board that you can take advantage of what we call set-asides. So our set-asides, there's goals that are implemented on the federal level that the government is mandated to spend 23% of federal funds with small business owners. And so why not partner with the government, and they have to spend money with you? And let me tell you, ladies, the government doesn't suffer from a recession. They don't suffer from inflation. They will not file bankruptcy, right? They won't close their business doors, right? And so it's just a win-win situation.
I was thinking of IV Hydration. Do they have any contracts for something like that?
You know what? I have not seen any IV hydration contracts, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah. It would be like wellness. You'd probably have to find an RFP that's like related to like some kind of holistic, something like that. It probably wouldn't be as specific, and then like show proof how IV hydration could be the solution for that problem, probably. Yeah. But that is so.
Yeah, probably, but I haven't personally seen one. Now this is a nursing podcast, so there are government contracts for nursing, right? So when you think about these agencies that are placing these nurses in the hospital, if it's a federal funded hospital, that's probably a contract that an agency has won. So I actually just passed along to my former director of nursing, who turned, anyways. So I forward over a contract to her. I'm like, take a look at this. The government is looking for nurses for the VA hospital.
Yeah.
And you have alignment and resources to a nursing agency. And so that's how it works too as well. You have to utilize your strategic partners within the government, because you have to remember they're so massive. We're talking about, 7 figures easily. And so you have to tap into your network.
And are you going through, was it grants.gov or something like that? Government?
No. So grants are very different from government contracts. You said that earlier. And so, we don't handle grants. We do government contracts. So just from an educational standpoint, so grants are just like school grants, right? They don't have to be repaid. You don't have to bid on them, right? They're allocated to those who apply, and the money is yours. For government contracts, they're paying you for a product or a service to be rendered to them. Yeah. So 2 completely different components of government funding.
Right. Okay. That's really good though. So there's even 2 different ones for grant. So you can go. So you can get, technically, if it's allowed, you can get grants and contracts even.
Absolutely, it's allowed. Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you find that being Black women owned, when you apply for these contracts, are there a lot of people bidding on them, or do you find you win them pretty easily because there's nobody or not that many people in this game doing that? How do you find that to be?
So I would say it's contingent on what the solicitation is. Okay. You have to remember it is the government, and so sometimes it's uneven. And it's not as just and fair as you may think. So there's some other things that are going on in the back office to where they're sliding these contracts over to some of these companies who are not truly deserving of that contract. But overall, I will have to tell you, from our community, there's no competition because, number one, we're scared of the government. We're scared to do business to the government. We've been taught to run away from the government, right, you guys? Just pay Uncle Sam, lay low, shh. And so now we're shifting the mindset of our community, and we're saying, hey, look, if you're doing business with integrity and you're running a professional operation, there's no reason why you should not be running to the government and leveraging what you've been born with, right? This is what you've been born with, that they have to spend the money with you. Because we have such an ignorance of government contracting, a lot of times, yes, there is a set aside attached to it, but they have to actually, provide them to some of these white female companies and entities, because we're not bidding on the opportunity, even though that there is a set aside attached to it. And so if we're not bidding on the opportunity, they have to have it sourced by someone. And so those larger companies will take advantage of that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, this has been just really mind blowing, and I always wanted to understand logistics. It's definitely have given me piqued my interest. But I have heard, and I want you to speak to this really quickly, and then we'll rapid fire, and then you will share your information. But what's the downside to being in logistics? I've heard people say they started it and then they were not successful. What would you think separates, or what's the downside to being in logistics if there's from your perspective?
Yeah. So from my perspective, some of the challenges that I've seen personally, that I've seen from my clients, are that you really don't understand your number, right? There's this magical number out there, $2 per mile. That's really not what your number is, right? And so not doing the ground level work to understanding what your operational cost is one huge component. Number 2, a lot of us don't understand business overall. Right. And so when you're talking about logistics and transportation, that is highly regulated by FMCSA, are one of the governing bodies that regulates transportation and logistics. You're going to see yourself out of business before you can even enjoy being in business, because it is highly regulated, and compliance is a huge issue for us who lack the knowledge of what it is to run a company with compliance. That's not normal conversation at our dinner table, right? Our parents are working 9 to 5s, coming home, just trying to make sure dinner is on the table, right? And so that that is a struggle for our minority community and those overall who really just don't understand business, and then especially business that is highly regulated. Another challenge that I see is we don't prepare for these downtimes. So right now in the market, within logistics and transportation, we're suffering. We're making some breaking numbers in regard to fuel costs. So diesel is at an all-time high. And so that's a very, very high overhead for us. And us as small fleet owners and small business owners, it's really hard for us to level out. Right. As we're penny pinching. And so when we had COVID, a lot of us were doing extremely well during COVID. But what do? We spend well as well. And so we did not prepare for these down seasons. And so transportation has those peaks and troughs, talking about nursing and pharmaceuticals. Trucking has those peaks and troughs as well, right? So we have those highs and we have those lows, and we need to prepare for those lows during our highs. Not really having true mentorship and guidance on what it looks like to navigate and move within this industry is another one.
Okay, so that segues into the question. Tell me how pivotal mentorship coaching is in this space, in any space, really.
In any space, right? In any space, it's essential. It's mandatory, if you ask me, right? And so, as I shared earlier in this interview, I had mentorship, I had guidance, I had, someone to say, "Hey, look, walk straight, walk left, walk right, walk through that door," right? That helps. That really, really helps. That's essential. That's priceless, if you ask me. And so mentorship is an investment. Mentorship needs to be vetted. You need to vet your mentor, right? And so that's another component. But mentorship overall is essential, especially when you're talking about a highly regulated industry, an industry that has a very high liability and overhead cost. You really have to pay attention to your numbers. You really have to understand the industry, how to network and pivot when time sees fit. And a mentor can help you navigate through that. A mentor also can lay at your feet some tools and resources that may take you years to accomplish or never at all. Right. And so in nursing, let's take it back to what we all three of us can relate to. You don't get out of nursing school and just get thrown out on the floor. Yeah. You what? You have shadowing, right? You have orientation. We have to, one thing for sure, I don't know about what your experience was, but for me, nursing school didn't prepare me for IV insertion. On that dead dummy in that fake vein. Now we're talking about ER where you're half dead, right? And so we may have to put in an IV in places that we just weren't trained on. And so luckily I had this amazing nurse, Christina, train me during, when I just got out of school, which helped me to be the nurse that I became, right? I proudly say I was a badass ER nurse because of my mentorship, right? That I had with Christina. And so mentorship is key. Mentorship is key for sure.
I want to do some really quick rapid fire questions.
We'll do the money, or is it that part of the?
Which part?
The earning potential.
Oh yeah, that was going to be one of my rapid fire questions. Yeah. Well, I was going to say two of those related to that, Melanie. One was what was your biggest contract that you obtained for through government contracts? And how long does it actually take to get to that point where you're getting the good contracts or the bigger contracts, or does it even matter? Is it even relevant?
So for those larger contracts, they definitely want to see past performance. And so they definitely want to know that you're able to perform with competence on these larger contracts. And so that's why I teach in mentorship, start in your backyard, start in the city, in the state level, right? Start to build your past performance. And then Team Integrity Knowledge Center is able to funnel through, our community to start to build some of that past performance. So yeah, those larger contracts, they're definitely going to want to make sure that you're competent and you're familiar with the scope and what the deliverables are of that contract for sure. Yeah.
And so what's the range of like the largest contracts that you've seen out there? Like, is it millions of dollars for one, or is it like usually on the high hundreds of thousands that you could obtain a contract for logistics per se? I can imagine it can get really large, especially if you get to the shipment.
It can get very large, very large when you're talking about logistics and IT. So when you're talking about like cyber safety and all of those things, and so very, very, very large contracts. I'll say this: one of our mentees, we just fulfilled a contract for 114 million.
Wow!
Whoa!
I was about to say 1,000,
Right?
And I still thought it was good. Okay, wow. So I'm guessing the larger, it seems to me, sounds like what you're saying is like the larger the contract, you have to you basically have to show proof that you are able to manage. Because if it's a large contract, that means it's a lot of work. So they want to make sure that you're able to do the job. And then the next thing is probably how specialized you are. I guess, would that be safe to say, like the contracts? So if you get into it and you start doing something general, it would be beneficial to get more specialized in logistics, whatever that means. Like you said, you try to figure out your unique selling proposition and you position yourself in a way that you can separate yourself from like the generals of the world, like I don't know, Amazons or UPS and FedExes of the world, right? In that space. So I think that that's absolutely amazing. And that gives hope, like from starting from humble beginnings. And this doesn't have to be like, even if you're not from the inner city, or you may not be a minority and you're listening to this podcast, but you may have had your own set of struggles, like to go from whatever your challenges are that you started with, and then to get to this point where you can get into this white male dominated space and actually be successful and secure money and not grants and contracts for the government. I think is absolutely amazing. And definitely one that can help a lot of people who are trying to figure it out. Do you have a book that you would recommend someone who is considering logistics or who just wants to know a little bit more? Is there a book, or is there a like something quick, nothing like a whole mentorship yet, but let's say they're like, I think I might want to do this. What's a book or a webinar or something you recommend?
Absolutely. So shameless plug, of course, I would recommend Trucking Meets GovCon Jumpstart. Our Trucking Meets GovCon Jumpstart lays down the foundation of what this will look like, right? So we can start to get a little bit more strategic. And so that's at a very, very low barrier of entry of like $97. Okay. Now, from a business standpoint, I would highly recommend Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. It's available on Amazon. He's a phenomenal author. He has made several books for entrepreneurs. But Business Made Simple has been my latest read, and it's been a game changer for me. And so that's one I would definitely recommend as well.
Yeah. Donald Miller, I read, he's not launched, but what it was the book that he's also written that I read? I can't remember, but
he's made a ton of books.
Yeah, I think anyway, it doesn't matter, but yes. Okay. So Business Made Simple. And I'm sure anyone who is considering business could probably read that book, right? I mean, it's recommended.
That book. Anyone can read that book, as well as Trucking Meets GovCon Jumpstart. Very, very user friendly. Also to layman's terms, because as with government contracting, it's content heavy and it's very unfamiliar territory for a lot of us. But no. You got to remember, right? I understand these different levels of learning, and so it's very, very simple, very easy to retain. And so everyone can get that at www.teamintegrityknowledgecenter.com.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I feel like you've given like a general overview, high level book, and then your course, which is specific. So like if you are interested in logistics, start here, and it's only $97. So it's not like they got to think twice about it or break the bank to like at least get introduced to the industry if it's something that they're interested in. Okay. How important is it to have a male on your team if you want to get into this industry? Because I know you mentioned your husband. Should they have a male? Does it matter? I know this is male dominated. Tell me your honest thoughts about it.
Absolutely. Done. Yeah. Absolutely. Hands down. We're talking about trucking. And so let's really talk, right? don't ask me about a tandem, an axle, air hose. Like that's not my strong point in the company, right? And so fleet management is a big component for staying in business in trucking. And so you need to have someone who understands the mechanics of a truck and someone who can also talk to these other drivers to where you're well respected. Us as women, we're not well received because we're not behind the wheel and we don't understand those different components of the truck. And so it's essential to have a male on the team.
I love that. Yeah, I figured that. That's why I asked. Listen, okay, so this has been, I don't know, this has been an amazing interview, and definitely outside. When I say outside of nursing. So I love that. And I want to find out from you, do you have, like, let's say some people already know they want to do trucking, like our logistics. Do you have like a mentorship or something that those who are serious and like, okay, I'm ready to get into this. I like her vibe. Do you already offer something, some type of mentorship for nurses, or not necessarily nurses, but anyone who's interested in starting this?
Absolutely. So we have Build Your Trucking Empire. Build Your Trucking Empire walks you through from A to Z, how to start the business, how to build the foundation, structuring of your back office, choosing of equipment, choosing of a driver. We provide you with 20 plus forms and templates for your onboarding, your policies and procedures. We provide you with direct shippers so you don't have to rely on the load board. Go out there and get the highest dollar possible. So Build Your Trucking Empire is hands down, by far, the starting place if you want to enter into logistics and transportation.
I love it. And so how do we find that?
TeamIntegrityKnowledgeCenter.com. TeamIntegrityKnowledgeCenter.com. You go online, you'll find all of our educational tools, all of our services and our products there.
Okay, awesome. And so how do we find you, Miss Melanie? Like, where are you at? Are you on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook?
Well, I haven't got with the TikTok yet. I'm still working on my TikTok two-step. But you can find me on Melanie Patterson, CEO on Instagram, Melanie Patterson on LinkedIn. But most importantly, Team Integrity Knowledge Center is everywhere. So you will find Team Integrity Knowledge Center on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Make sure you guys are tapping in. This is truly life-changing what we're doing. I'm so honored and proud what we've accomplished and the results that we're getting for these small business owners during this very, very hard time in business. And so Team Integrity Knowledge Center, Team Integrity Knowledge Center on all platforms.
And you got the receipts, $114 million contract. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I don't even know what I would do with that amount of money. Okay, so the last thing is, can you close us out with, it doesn't have to be related to logistics or transportation, but just some like positive words for nurses who are like still in the struggle. They're still, they're burnt out, they're tired. What can you tell them, like, or what do you tell your own clients or people who you speak with who are experiencing what we're going through right now in our profession?
Yeah, that's really good. So what I would something that I have here for me, that I have to remind myself as we go throughout life and encounter different phases of our life as women, as mothers, as sisters, as spouses, as nurses and career women. Never give up. Mm-hmm. Never give up. Never give up. Just really, truly bet on yourself. And invest in yourself. If this is something that you truly desire, jump. There's no reward without risk. There's no reward without the risk. And so bet on yourself, never give up, and go get what's yours. Go get what's yours. Know what's possible. Know what's possible. My home office didn't always look like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for us. That was another drop the mic moment. Right. Thank you so much, Melanie, for coming in here, providing all this value to our listeners. Again, we are very passionate about nurses and those who want to pursue entrepreneurship. We're not trying to force anyone, but we definitely believe that it should be considered, especially in the current climate that it is in. So thank you so much for blessing us with your presence on the Nurse Boss Shift.
Yes,
and we are out. Chris, anything else you want to say before
That's
we close
all.
out?
Thank you so much. Another powerful episode.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. This was amazing.
Yay. Bye, you guys.